Hi, I'll keep this brief. I recently decided to go back and replay my favorite MGS game of all time, Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater, in 2024. And it's still a goddamn masterpiece. Beware spoilers for MGS3 and potential spoilers for MGS2. Please note that all of the footage captured for my playthrough was done so on the Master Collection re-release on the PS4, so some bugs mentioned may not be applicable to the original PS2 version or the PS3 and Xbox 360 HD remaster versions of the game. Alright, this may come as a surprise to some of you, but the Metal Gear franchise is a pivotal game series that I personally attribute my passion for video games as seen in the present day to. Yes, really. I was first introduced to the series by a cousin who played the first game, Metal Gear Solid 1, on the PS1, and he introduced me to the concept of keycards, levels, boss fights, and the titular Metal Gear, the greatest soldier and video game character to ever be conceived, Solid Snake. Might Get Shot a Bunch 3 is a tactical espionage action title, which was originally released on November 17th, 2004. It was directed, written, and produced by the internet's favorite crackhead of movie references, convoluted storytelling, way deeper than ever wanted lore, insane and larger-than-life characters. And no, I don't mean Scott Cawthon, but Hideo Kojima, Kojima-san, may as well be the Scott Cawthon of Japanese video game culture. Snake Eater follows a young big boss, a young naked snake, as his mission is to infiltrate deep behind Soviet enemy lines undetected and do, well, Metal Gear-y things? For those uninitiated to Kojima's world of paranormal spec ops teams, literal nuclear-equipped fucking Gundam, the signature over-the-top and in-your-face meta-narrative, and all the other hallmarks of what defines a, quote, Metal Gear game. Let me give you an example from this game's predecessor, May Gang Soldiers 2, Sons of Liberty. We need look no further than Dead Cell from the game's second act. Does anyone remember Fortune? Daughter of that one Marine commander who drowned when the tanker-carrying Metal Gear Ray sank? Yes, this plot is actually that convoluted. Does anyone remember how she was introduced as the, quote, incarnation of Lady Luck herself, end quote, and how no bullets, explosives, and weapons could hit her? Ever? No? Just me? Okay, jokes and preamble aside, all you need know is that MGS2 was a meta-commentary on the nature of cash-grabbing sequels and internet culture before 90% of us were even born. Yes, I was born after MGS2 came out circa 2001. Sue me. Missionary Guild Station 3 Danger Noodle Launcher took the concepts that MGS2 established with its revolutionary style in gameplay, level design, and character writing and cranks it to a fucking kajillion, and then throws you headfirst into my favorite historical era I think any video game has ever had the stones to throw you into, the Cold War. Cue the intro sequence!
After the end of World War II, the world was split into two, East and West. This marked the beginning of the era called the Cold War.
The game opens with an absolute treat of cinematography as a US aircraft's engines whir into the soundscape. Then it begins. Immediately the tone is set. Metal Gear Solid 3 is not your dad's Metal Gear game. This one is much more gritty and grounded than any of the games that came before it. You get told the following. You're on the Fox Unit's maiden solo infiltration mission. Being sighted and identified as a US soldier deployed deep in the Soviet jungle may well cause nuclear consequences as, officially, there aren't supposed to be any US operatives in the USSR.
20 minutes to drop off.
Commencing internal depressurization. Equipment check. Arm main parachute.
All right. You ready to go?
Drop zone still showing a high pressure mass. Cav okay.
Good. We've got high visibility.
But yet, here you are. tasked with finding, rescuing, and extracting a Russian rocket scientist turned weapons specialist, Dr. Nikolai Stepanovich Sokolov, the man solely responsible for sending Yuri Gagarin into space, and his work being the heralded Vostok rocket.
Does this panty waste know what he's doing?
Yes, the scientist you are sent to retrieve and bring back to the West with his defection is the very same man who built the tech that sent the first human into space.
Hey, are you deaf?
He said put out the cigar and put on your mask.
Like with all good Metal Gear Solid plots, things quickly speed up to 1,000,000 miles an hour, and that's when everything flies off the rails. The mother of special ops and our protagonist's mentor, the Boss, a legendary war hero who helped the Allies during the assault on Normandy, and the woman responsible for winning World War II for the Americans, is now defecting to the Soviet Union for reasons we don't yet understand. With her, she brings along a welcoming committee in the form of the experimental Davy Crockett recoilless launcher and 2 fucking mini nukes straight out of Fallout. That's when the colonel of the enemy faction, Colonel Volgin, takes said nuke and vaporizes Dr. Sokolov's testing lab, killing innocent Russian scientists in the process. Snake gets his ass handed to him on a silver platter a la CQC by the Boss, and gets left for dead in the jungle.
We're coming to get you now.
This incident, understandably, sparks outrage from President Khrushchev as well. Firstly, a US aircraft was picked up in Soviet airspace, then a nuke was dropped on the country. I mean, the man's is only putting 2 and 2 together with his limited information. That's when President Johnson reassures Khrushchev that, "I swear the US didn't do it, I promise." And thus, understandably, Khrushchev wants proof. This is where we come in. We are then tasked to head back to the Soviet jungle to kill the Boss, the dirty defector and nuclear weapons kleptomaniac, on the mission the game is named after, Operation Snake Eater. Operation Snake Eater throws you back into the Soviet jungle on one mission straight from the CIA, to assassinate the recently defected Boss, which has you navigate various locations, such as swamplands, mangroves, and jungles galore. On your journey, you'll encounter various enemies and even technical obstacles in the way of you completing your mission of killing your mentor. To start, you're supposed to meet up with a CIA informant named Adam at the self-same location you rescued Sokolov from but a few weeks prior. Only to get there and learn that Adam is in fact a woman? Not just any woman, but a woman who's a badass, bike-riding, booba-showing, bad guy-killing femme fatale codenamed Eva. Real subtle, Kojima-san. She gives you a gun. Snake pretty much comes over the gun that Eva hands him,
In close-range combat, a knife can sometimes be more useful than a gun.
and then you wake up, finding yourself surrounded by a crack Russian team, the Ocelot Unit, commanded by our favorite American-Russian Revolver Shalashaska Ocelot. Yes, this is young Revolver Ocelot as a Russian major. And what gun would Mr. Revolver Ocelot carry, his characterization and namesake in mind? A revolver, perchance? Wrong! Man's out here with a fucking Makarov as though it were a revolver. Anyway, you beat his ass, he gets slapped in the face with a bike. Yes, really. Here's the clip. And you're set to defeat his men and escape northward to continue your mission.
He's still young.
As you venture north, the journey is long. Human contact is few and far between, and every goddamn thing, person, and creature in this jungle wants you fucking dead. So you stop, take a knee, and open the radio. And here's where this game's writing shines. Your team of operations oversight, who functionally serve as the game's tutorial while being diegetic, end up making various references to pop culture of the time, and the attention to detail with every unique radio call for every animal, fruit, vegetable, plant, and mushroom you could collect, with the how's it taste paramedic calls versus if you called her after you tasted them is fucking mind-boggling for a game from 2004. And that's just one of your support team. Now imagine that for your commanding officer, Major Zero, a British lad who likes James Bond and who serves as your objective briefing person. Paramedic, as mentioned, is our consulting, Godzilla-loving, on-call virtual doctor, and the lady with the book about species in the area and often how they taste. Not always, though. Mr. Sigand, who serves as a weapons advisor and tactical guy. And you can even ring Eva for local level knowledge about troop movements, the area's lore, and even where sneaky exits and weapons are. Eva, being a spy, knows these things, of course. Oh, Paramedic handles your saves too, by the way, which is great. She's really funny in the save dialogue.
There.
The world of Metal Gear Solid 3 is one of sheer atmosphere and isolation. As you wander through the jungles, mangrove swamps, and mountainous regions of Selenoyarsk and the surroundings, you feel a deep sense of loneliness and despair, but also wonder and awe as the dense soundscape of birds chirping away, reacting to your and your enemy's every move, squawking in panic when you get too close, and even fleeing when gunshots ring out, and coming back to roost when the chaos dies down. This game is completely devoid of any music or sound aside from the diegetic noises of the environment, from footsteps to guard dialogue and chatter, to animal calls and even the sounds of individual blades of grass rustling with the gusts of wind. Need I remind you that this is a game from 2004? It's spectacular! It places heavy emphasis on the sounds of the world, which sells the sense of cohesion and suspends your disbelief to fully immerse you in the deep and dense Russian jungles. Despite the majority of this game taking place over the span of a single mission in a localized area, it still manages to have varied and highly detailed environments. For example, the aforementioned jungles, the mangroves, mountains, and even cave environments all have their own distinguishable style and atmosphere, meaning none of the areas you travel through blends together, leaving a lasting impression of the world in your head hours after the credits roll. Since the game's focus is survival, and more closely, with the focus of survival being in these often hostile environments, every single area has its own challenges and threats to overcome, in several, sometimes regular and logical, and other times in creative and nuanced ways. A brilliant case study of this design philosophy is exemplified in the caves leading up to the boss fight with the Pain. More on the bee handler in a bit, by the way. When you enter the caves, you may or may not have the thermal goggles yet. It's also pitch black inside the caves, and it's a labyrinth of interconnected tunnels, crawl spaces, and dead ends. You could try stumble around in the dark for a bit, but if you're stumped on as to how to navigate these dark passageways, you follow the regular old shtick. Take a knee, and call up the support team via radio. You might get a little bit of useful
Snake,
information
are you okay?
though.
Snake.
A couple of vague messages and a hint to the location of where you might find a torch in the cave, which, as you would expect, is a distance into it because of fucking course it is. And you start ending up examining every single item you have in your pack. You could, if you found them already, just use thermal goggles for a logical and normal approach to being in a cave, or the night vision ones for that matter. But, as they always say in a Metal Gear game, necessity is the mother of invention. With the less than helpful radio advice in mind, you might have a brainwave. Wait, I have a cigar. Surely its only purpose is to make me look badass and drain my health, right? So, you begrudgingly take it out of your backpack, equip it, and lo and behold, a dim light source. Is it ideal? No! Does it still drain your HP while equipped in the cave? Yes, of course it does. Is it galaxy brain levels of teaching you that items in-game have more than one intended use case? You betcha! Using your cancer-causing source of light as an aid, you manage to navigate through to the area of where the torch is, immediately stash the cigar back in your backpack, replacing it with the torch you just collected, and can continue on your merry way through the cave. Now, what if I just told you that this is one creative solution to one environmental problem in one area of the game, and that there are many, many more areas with many different problems, all with multiple solutions or even interesting ways to solve them. Which brings me on to the mechanics of this stellar piece of video game history. Metal Gear Solid as a franchise is known for its creative and lingering use of mechanics to help envelop you in a deep and engaging world with a sense of tension and real urgency in how often you have many obstacles to tackle and various methods to handle them, from conventional down to right crack-headed in the means of your success. Every single piece of equipment you collect during your mission has numerous ways it can be used in order to solve a problem that may present itself. Without rehashing the above-mentioned example again, know that almost every single problem, obstacle, and set piece in this game has multiple solutions. In order to understand this further, let's explore the jailbreak scene at the end of the game's second act. Come on, we all know the jailbreak scene in this game, even if you haven't played it for yourself. You know how you can like puke to escape the jail cell, call a certain radio frequency to unlock and open the door, and there's many, many more ways you can get out of there. We've all seen the interesting takes, we've seen the videos hashing how to do this. But what never seems to baffle me is how the actions you take after escaping the cell can affect the following segment as well. If, in a situation, you don't remove the tracking device that's embedded in your back, the Ocelot unit ends up following you to the river pass where you end up after jumping from the outlet of the Groznygrad sewers. If you do remove the tracker, however, you end up with a quiet segment leading up to where you meet Eva again under the waterfall. And that is just spectacular. Decisions impacting actual gameplay segments. This was ahead of its time. The plot is a fairly simple one with minimal twists and turns for a Metal Gear game of this era, considering that the previous game in the saga was MGS2. Need I say more? Metal Gear Solid 3 is a beautifully written and executed piece of video game media in modern history. The way that the story managed to tug on my heartstrings when I first played it back in 2008, and then again in 2014, and now again in 2024 is just bewildering, honestly. How the simplistic idea of the change in times, rulers, and ideologies impact the world, and furthermore, by extension, soldiers, is brilliantly explained and explored in the story, and how Snake's relationship to the boss is contextualized with the history that they have of being a commanding officer and a soldier, a mentor and an apprentice, and even more subtly and more hinted toward, that of an adoptive mother to a child. Snake's journey is relatable, if only because he was forced by his country and thus the times to kill the only woman he ever loved. The woman who made him the man and the soldier he is today, and the one who trained him for missions like this, knowing full well she would have to die at her apprentice's hands one day. How the music and the dialogue sells the cohesion of these characters being real people with real ideologies, real beliefs, and real emotions makes this game's story one worth experiencing even in 2024. I wish not to go into much more detail in case you still want to play it, but note that even with what I have spoiled so far, there is still so much more to experience, learn, and discover about the story. So I urge you to go play it for yourself if possible. Like most games in its series, has boss fights with several interesting, and some not so interesting, bosses and set pieces. And I'm not going to discuss them all in detail, but instead, I'll give you a brief or quick strategy guide on how to beat them with reference to their unique gimmicks along the way. I don't want to give you everything on a silver platter here, come on. What do you take me for? Ocelot is the first boss that you'll encounter.
Prefer to hunt alone.
In order to beat him, shoot the bee's nest, stay behind the rocks, and just use the tranquilizer gun or the stun grenade, or just the 1911 to gun him down for an easy W. Very simple. He is your entry-level skill check to see if you understand how to shoot a gun. Next, Shortly after the fight with Ocelot is your inaugural Cobra unit member, the Pain. Yes, it's time for the B-Man. A B-Man with a B-made Tommy gun and B-nades. Use the bug juice. Jump in the water to avoid the green pheromone gas and the red bullet bees. Use grenades or stun grenades or the M37 shotgun to destroy the bee barrier that he does, to just kill him and move on. He's not worth my time. Next up, you end up encountering the Fear, the first kinda challenging boss. Trick to this man's, use the thermal goggles to see him as he hops from tree to tree with his stealth camo on. You can poison him using poisonous frogs or rotten food to end up lowering his stamina, and then just end him when he's weak. It's that simple. Up next is the best boss fight in the game, and we have all heard of him. It is the legendary old sniper, The End. Now this one was an endeavor. There's 2 ways to clap him early in the game. Just get around fighting him to cheese the fight. But who would want to cheese the best opponent in the game? It's not like I did that in my second playthrough or anything. Anyway, this is a sniper duel. Find him using your binoculars or the thermal goggles. Shoot him in the dome a few times and he's done for. Or you could sneak up behind him if you're good at the game, and there's a few other strats as well. But the easiest is usually to SVD him in the skull for a little bit. It's usually bad for his health. In the tunnels leading up to Groznygrad, you meet my favorite boss to fight specifically, but also the one I had the most trouble with in this playthrough. Considering that up till this point in the game, I had not died once to a boss, whereas I died 8 times to the Fury. This man's thing is space, fire, and anger. He starts off being immune to flame damage. So at first, things like your white phosphorus grenades and the like do no damage to him. But if you're clever and you attack him with a knife at point blank, you can slice the crap out of his flame-resistant suit, and then his own plumes of flame will actually end up hurting him. Basic tips for the Fury: keep out of the tunnel he's in, watch out for his jetpack boost flight attack, and grenades will come in handy in this fight. Even for the non-lethal runs, trust. I bested him using stun nades. After the Fury, the bosses end up taking a little bit of a backseat for a while you're in the base of Groznygrad. Until the escape segment where you break out of the prison cell and throw yourself out of the sewers and encounter the Sorrow. Now, would I count this as an actual boss fight? No. There's one way to beat it. After you make it to the end of the river, Snake will die. He'll get the game over screen and everything. But just use the revival pill and it's done. It's a gimmick fight, which is sad. The Sorrow is so cool. Hashtag give the Sorrow a proper boss fight in Metal Gear Solid Delta, we beg. After gallivanting around in a river delta and then under a waterfall, with your return to Groznygrad, you take on Colonel Volgin. And let me tell you, this one is a fucking doozy if you don't know what you're doing. All I'm gonna say, dodge his bullet attacks, dodge his electric attacks, and have the RPG handy to make him regret having tied you up like he did. That's all I can say here. I struggled with Volgin. He is a pain. He has a shield. His attacks have stupid range. He wastes your fucking ammo. Just have an RPG and just dodge his shit. You'll be fine. Trust, bestie. You got this. The penultimate boss in the game is the dreaded Shagohod, the rocket-propelled, nuclear-equipped, multi-terrain tank that Sokolov developed. It gets more of a set-piece fight in the beginning, as you proceed to RPG it while riding in a sidecar with Eva on her bike for your grand escape. Until you get to the rail bridge, then you fight it properly. Twice. Quick tip, RPG the threads to hit the back that's unarmored like a tank to secure an easy victory. Both times, both when Volgan's on the cannon and not. Just RPG the tracks to cause it to spin, shoot the back where it's unarmored with the RPG, take health out of it, Bob's your uncle. Or if you're like me and a fucking menace, you can just commandeer the anti-aircraft gun in the arena and just blow it the fuck up. Simple. Then of course, the moment that we've all been waiting for. The entire point of this game and this mission, your final opponent, the boss herself. For this one, no notes, no help, no comments, no jokes, no spoilers. Just this single frame showing you how beautiful and cinematic this fight is. Nothing else. You gotta experience this one for yourself. I'm sorry. Now, with everything that's been covered by this video so far, and my near constant jacking off of its quality and singing of its praises, I know it's not perfect, and this version of it especially isn't. The game suffers from audio issues, some severely low resolution textures in some areas. It only supports native 1080p resolution at 60 FPS, even on the PS5 and Xbox Series versions. The extra content from the PS3 HD remaster was culled. The game is literally a re-release of the HD re-release. And on top of everything, the price makes the Master Collection an example of goddamn daylight robbery. I would still, however, recommend picking it up and trying it though. Sure, it may not have the Ape Escape secret mode that the PS2 original release had, and it may have some technical issues of audio desyncing from in-game actions in certain cutscenes. But then again, Metal Gear Solid 3 is a 20-year-old game. I checked. And if you want to know, yes, this masterpiece still holds up as a fantastic linear stealth action title all these 20 years later. It may not be the prettiest entry visually for this franchise, or the most complex, or the most convoluted in terms of plot and story. But you know what? I'd say that's what makes it so fantastic all these years later. Sure, it improved many things that MGS2 did, but it was also a lot less ambitious in other places, as if they knew where to spend the time on development and where the budget should go for a game like this. And I feel it's this exact formula and these limitations even that allowed them to make such a focused and stellar video game almost 20 years ago at the time of recording this voiceover. Metal Gear Solid 2 may have well been my first official Metal Gear Solid title that I played, the first game in the franchise that I experienced. But Metal Gear Solid 3 is the game that made me fall in love with the stealth genre and the Metal Gear saga. All in all, more than I've said in this video would just be rehashing my thoughts. So here's the takeaway. Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater in 2024 is still a goddamn masterpiece and among my top 10 favorite video games I've ever played. If you haven't experienced it yet in the year of our Lord 2024, consider picking up the Master Collection and jump right in. Maybe this one will even make you enjoy the franchise enough to pick up Metal Gear Solid Delta that's in production, and if it does, I'm happy for you. I, however, am going to keep the rose-tinted glasses of nostalgia firmly on my nose and continue to idolize this game for what it means to me. Thanks for watching.